Hey, good morning, everybody. Hope your day's off to a great start. So today I just wanted to chat a little bit about seller possession after closing and buyer possession before closing. I've seen a lot more of these coming across my desk lately, and had a lot more conversations with agents than I have in the past. I think people are just trying to get creative on how to make non-ideal circumstances work for themselves, and sellers are in positions where maybe they need the proceeds from the house, and they want to get their house sold first before closing on the new house, and therefore they want to hang over and stay in the house for some period of time afterwards until they close on the new one. And while I get it, that's convenient for them. There are some things that you as the agent need to make sure you're talking through with your clients, whether it's the buyer or the seller, and regardless of which side they're on, because the clients don't always think through the stuff that could go wrong. They're just thinking through what helps make their life easier, or maybe as a buyer, giving permission to the seller to stay afterwards, what allows me to get this home when I'm making my offer. So just help them think through some of the potential downfalls. And so some stuff I want you to think about is this. If you are a buyer of a home and you allow the seller to stay and possess the home after closing, the seller is responsible for maintaining that property. However, what happens if they don't, right? What happens if the seller moves out, buyer now moves into their house, let's say 30 days after the closing, and the HVAC is not working right, or all of a sudden the refrigerator doesn't seem to be cooling properly, or the ice maker doesn't work, or they notice now there's a hole in the wall next to the toilet. So a buyer, if they're allowing the seller to stay after closing, needs to make sure they do a very thorough walkthrough when that seller moves out. Now, financially, the seller is obligated to not only maintain the property, but if anything isn't working or breaks or is damaged, they're required to pay to correct that. But how does the buyer get that money? If the seller doesn't just offer it up, the buyer then has to sue them, right? And so anytime we talk about your remedy being taking someone to court, that can be a headache, and sometimes the costs aren't worth the reward, and so it puts your buyer in kind of a tough spot. So you want to make sure they've just thought through what that means to become a landlord on a property they just bought, that all they really want to do is move into, right? And so when people have their hearts set on either a seller possession after closing or a buyer possession before closing, and by the way, the seller that allows the buyer to move in early, same situation. If the buyer damages the property eventually doesn't close for whatever reason, the seller now has to get that buyer out. And it's a tough spot for the buyer to be in as well. So like I said, no matter who you represent and which side of the fence they're on, it can be really tricky. Now, if everything goes well, great. But you want to make sure that you're advising your client to perhaps have a discussion with an attorney, right, to understand what their rights are, because the seller possession and the buyer possession forms are very short forms. They don't cover a lot of situations. They just kind of paint a broad stroke on who's responsible for what and how it's going to work. But certainly things could go wrong. And of course, the clients want to understand the insurance implications as well. That person either staying in the home after closing or a buyer coming in early needs to maintain sufficient renter's insurance to cover their belongings. So just make sure that you're having discussions with your clients whenever they bring this up. And I'm happy to talk through the potential pitfalls with you as well. Most agents don't go through enough of these types of transactions to see what can go wrong. And so their limited view on it is that they typically work out. And while often they do, certainly there are some cases where things go really south and you have some hurt feelings and some tough financial situations. So I'm happy to talk through that with you whenever that comes up and help you kind of craft your conversation with your client. So hopefully that gives you something to think about when it comes to buyer possession before closing and seller possession after closing. And as always, if you have any questions or want to chat, just give me a call. See you guys.